If you've ever walked into school and felt something was wrong before anyone even said a word, then you already know the atmosphere I lived in during the 2003 school year. That year didn't feel normal, not even close. It felt like the walls themselves were whispering, like every locker door hid a secret, and every student moved through the halls with the same nervous glance over their shoulder. It started slowly, one missing item here, one stolen backpack there. Nobody panicked at first. Schools always had petty theft. But by the third week of September, it was no longer petty. It was no longer rare. It became a pattern. Then a problem. Then an epidemic. And finally, a full-blown mystery that swallowed our entire school whole. The strange thing was, it didn't happen loudly. There were no broken locks dangling open, no signs of force, no scratches around the combination dial. Items didn't disappear with chaos. They vanished cleanly, quietly, surgically. A wallet would be gone. A calculator. A necklace. Someone's expensive shoes. Another student's lunch. A backpack zipped shut neatly, but empty on the inside. Every disappearance was too precise, too intentional, too effortless. And what made it worse was that every student swore the same thing. My locker was locked. That was the phrase we heard so often. It became the unofficial slogan of that school year. My locker was locked, spoken with confusion at first, then fear, then frustration, and finally fury. Soon, students started walking differently. They pressed their backpacks close to their chests, hugged their binders like shields. They checked their lockers before first period, after first period, during lunch, after school. Sometimes, kids would spin their lock 2 or 3 times just to be sure it clicked. The sound of metal dials turning became background. Noise click, click, click echoing through the hallway like a chorus of paranoia. The rumors started almost immediately. And when I say rumors, I don't mean harmless cafeteria gossip. I mean full-scale theories, the kind you'd expect from a detective movie, not a group of bored teenagers. People said maybe it was a teacher, because teachers had master keys. Maybe it was a janitor. Maybe it was a senior who figured out how to read locker combinations by watching fingers move. Maybe it was a group effort, a small clan of thieves working together. Maybe someone hacked into the school network and printed off the agenda of the combination lists. Every theory sounded wild, until you remembered that nearly every locker being hit was locked. That's when wild started sounding reasonable. I remember one specific lunchtime conversation when the fear really clicked for me. A guy from my math class slammed his tray down in frustration and announced to everyone who would listen, "Someone stole my gym shoes. My freaking used gym shoes. Who even steals used shoes?" Another kid responded, "They took my wallet. Had $30 in it." A girl leaned in and whispered, "My locker had a padlock." A padlock, and it was still locked when I opened it. Everyone stared at her like she'd just revealed a ghost story. And in a way, she had. But strangely, the students weren't the worst part. The worst part was the administration, the principal, the vice principal, the people whose literal job was to protect us. They dismissed every complaint, every theft, every student's fear with the same lazy, insulting answer. "You must have given out your locker combination." Their tone never changed. Their body language never changed. Their attitude was always the same. This is your fault. It didn't matter if you swore you hadn't told anyone. It didn't matter if the stolen item was worth $20 or $200. They didn't care about the pattern. They didn't care that more than 50 lockers had been hit by October. To them, the problem wasn't a thief, it was careless students. And then there was the fee. The infamous fee. If you wanted your locker combination changed, because it had clearly been compromised, the school forced you to pay $150, not a penny less. And this wasn't 2024 money, it was 2003 money, when $150 felt like a small fortune. For most students, $150 might as well have been $1,500. And here's the most infuriating part. They didn't investigate the thefts, but they certainly collected the fees. The school made more money off locker thefts than the thief did. Students complained. Parents complained. Some even tried to go to the district office. But the principal shut everything down aggressively. He insisted the thefts weren't real, or that students exaggerated, or that people were misplacing items. Misplacing a TI-86 calculator? Misplacing someone else's necklace found later at a pawn shop? Misplacing half the school's valuables? His excuses were pathetic, but he stuck to them like his career depended on it. Maybe it did. By late October, the atmosphere was unbearable. I'd see students holding their lockers half open just to make sure their stuff was still there. People stopped bringing anything valuable to school. A few even started carrying backpacks into classrooms against the rules because they didn't trust putting them in lockers anymore. Teachers complained, but students didn't care. Fear beats detention any day. And then one day, it happened to me. The day everything changed started like any other. Cold morning, messy hair, barely awake. I walked to my locker, spun the dial automatically, opened the door, and felt my stomach drop like I'd been pushed off a cliff. My graphing calculator, my $150 T-86 was gone. Just gone. No broken lock. No disturbance. No sign anyone had even touched the locker. My other items were there. My books, my folder, my extra pencils. But the one thing actually worth money had vanished, cleanly, quietly, perfectly. I stood there staring at the empty slot where the calculator had been, trying to convince myself I was wrong. Maybe I took it home? Maybe I left it in class? But no, my routine was strict. I always placed it in the same spot. Always. And as I stared at that empty space, something ugly crawled up my spine. Shock first, then confusion, then embarrassment, and finally, fury. Someone stole from me. Me, someone who never shared his combination, never let anyone near his locker. My friends were idiots sometimes, but not thieves. Not like this. And I knew with absolute certainty that I hadn't told a single soul my locker combo. Not one person. So whoever stole my calculator had access to combinations in a way that shouldn't have been possible. I reported it, of course. Walked straight to the office. Walked straight to the principal. Walked straight into the same brick wall every other student had hit. The principal didn't even look up at me when I tried explaining. He just sighed and said the line he'd spoken 1,000 times already. "You must have given someone your combination." I pushed back. I didn't give anyone anything. I'm 100% sure. He cut me off. It's always the same story. You gave out the combination. Not our problem. If you want the lock changed, it's $150. The rage that hit me in that moment didn't feel like normal anger. It felt deeper. Like something boiling under my skin. I wasn't just being robbed physically, I was being robbed of the truth. Robbed of justice. Robbed of the security everyone deserved in a school. But I paid the fee. My father and I didn't have money to waste, but he knew I hadn't lied. He reluctantly handed over the $150 for the lock change, muttering under his breath the whole time about how ridiculous it was. What I didn't know back then was that this moment, this theft, this humiliation, this injustice was the spark that would ignite the most explosive, scandalous chain reaction our school had ever seen. Because my father wasn't just angry, he was connected. And he was connected to one particular person who didn't take kindly to injustice. A county detective. A man my father had known for years. A man who treated me like his own nephew. A man we'll call Detective Buddy. The moment my dad told him what happened, everything changed. And I had no idea that behind the scenes, as the school pretended everything was normal, Detective Buddy was already digging, already watching, already planning. While the principal brushed him off, while the school tried to shut him down, while they even tried to fight a warrant in court, he was preparing something bigger, something smarter, something precise. He wasn't going to catch the thief by accident. He was going to trap him. And the bait? Me. Or more specifically, something he would hide in my locker. But that part of the story comes later. For now, all I knew was frustration, embarrassment, helplessness, and the growing sense that something inside me had snapped. The school didn't believe me. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about any of us. And something deep inside whispered that if justice was going to happen, it wasn't going to come from the people in suits. It would come from someone who actually gave a damn. Someone like Detective Buddy. That crime wave shaped every day of that year. It created paranoia, mistrust, fear, and anger. But what nobody expected, not the principal, not the thief, not even the students, was that the crime wave was about to explode into the biggest scandal our little county had seen in decades. And I was right in the middle of it. The weeks following the theft of my calculator felt like walking through molasses slow, heavy, suffocating. Every morning I walked to my locker with a strange mix of dread and irritation settling deep in my stomach. Even after paying the ridiculous $150 fee for a combination change, I didn't feel any safer. If anything, the new number made the situation feel even more sinister. Who had the old combo? How did they get it? How many other students had their, supposedly private, codes floating around in someone else's hands? I'd spin the brand new lock slowly, listening to the faint clicks as if they could somehow reassure me. But all they did was remind me that even metal and steel couldn't protect anything in that school. It was like placing a Band-Aid over a bullet wound and pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Not for me. Not for anyone. And definitely not for my father. He wasn't the type to let things go quietly, especially not when it came to me. The moment I told him how the school treated me, how they dismissed my complaint, blamed me, charged me, his entire demeanor changed. My dad wasn't a loud man usually, but that night I could hear the anger simmering under every breath he took, like a pot ready to boil over. He kept repeating the same thing under his breath, robbed and then blamed for it. What kind of school is this? I didn't realize it then, but he already knew who he was going to call. He didn't even hesitate. He reached for the phone and dialed the number of the one man he trusted to get to the bottom of anything. Detective Buddy. I grew up with Uncle Buddy in my life. He wasn't family by blood, but he might as well have been. He and my dad were drinking buddies, fishing buddies, and the kind of friends who would drop everything to help each other. To me, he was the cool adult who could crack jokes one minute and intimidate grown men the next. I respected him in a way only a kid could respect a man who carried a badge and a gun for a living. So when he heard what happened to me, how the school denied every theft, how they accused me of lying, how they charged us the outrageous lock fee, his reaction was instant. I didn't hear the full conversation, but the tone of my father's voice told me enough. And when my dad finally hung up, he looked at me with this expression that was half anger, half reassurance. "Buddy's going to look into it," he said simply. And somehow that made the air around me feel lighter. What I didn't know was that Detective Buddy wasted no time. The very next day, he went down to the school in person. He walked through those front doors with his badge displayed clearly and asked, professionally and politely, for access to the security footage from the day my calculator went missing. He might as well have asked for the principal's bank statements. The school stonewalled him instantly. "There's no theft problem," the principal insisted, refusing to even entertain the idea. "Your student must have shared his locker combination. That's all this is." Buddy tried explaining the pattern, the dozens of reports, the fact that multiple students had complained in the same way. The principal scoffed. "Teenagers lie," he said. That line alone could have lit a fire under anyone, but it damn near infuriated Buddy. Then the principal made it worse by saying, "And if you want those tapes, detective, you'll need a warrant." Most people expected Buddy to back off at that point, but they didn't know him. If you told him he couldn't do something, that was the fastest way to guarantee he would. So he got the warrant, legally, properly, by the book. And when he returned, signed warrant in hand, the school fought it. They actually dragged the matter into court, claiming that handing over hallway camera footage that belonged to a public school was a violation of student privacy. Buddy told me later that he had never seen a principal so desperate to avoid transparency. It was suspicious. It was desperate. And it told him exactly what he needed to know. Someone inside that school either didn't want the truth coming out, or already knew what the truth was. That was the moment everything changed. Buddy realized he wasn't dealing with a simple theft case. He was dealing with something bigger, something systematic. And the school was either too incompetent to notice or too invested to admit it. Or both. So he made a decision. If the school wouldn't let him see the thief through the cameras, he would force the thief to reveal himself another way. And that's when he came up with the plan that would eventually take down the biggest locker thief the district had ever seen. A few days later, Buddy showed up at our house without warning. He walked in with the confident stride of someone who had a strategy already carved into stone. In his hand was a black laptop bag, sleek, expensive looking, the kind kids would drool over in 2003. because barely anyone actually had a laptop back then. He set it down on the kitchen table in front of me. "You're going to put this in your locker," he said plainly. I blinked. "What?" He leaned forward, tapping the bag. "And you're going to tell everyone you know that you got a new laptop. Make sure it sounds real. Make sure it spreads." I stared at him, confused, uncertain whether he was joking. "Uncle Buddy, why?" He smirked, that knowing detective smirk I had seen 1,000 times before. "Because we're going to let the thief steal the wrong thing." I didn't fully understand until he unzipped the bag just enough for me to see inside. Nestled between soft padding was a brand new laptop worth over $1,000, an insane amount of money at the time. And hidden inside a side pocket, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, was a small GPS tracking device blinking faintly. "This is bait," he explained, lowering his voice. "And anyone who takes it gets caught." My heart raced at the idea. Part of me was nervous, terrified even. I'd barely recovered from losing my calculator. Now I was carrying around a laptop worth 10 times that amount. What if something went wrong? What if I got blamed again? What if this turned into an even bigger mess? But the other part of me, the part that had been humiliated, robbed, dismissed, and treated like a liar, felt a spark ignite inside. For the first time all year, I felt like something was finally under my control. Like someone was standing up for me. For all of us. Buddy placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry. You won't get in trouble. I've already documented everything. But we need this thief to fall into the trap. And trust me, they will." And so the plan began. The next day, I walked through the halls with the laptop bag slung over my shoulder. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it contained the weight of the entire school year. I casually mentioned it to friends during class changes. "Yeah, my dad surprised me with a laptop," I'd say, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's in my locker for now." I didn't want to carry it all day. Word spread exactly the way rumors always did in high. School fast, messy, unstoppable. Within hours, I overheard kids whispering, "Did you hear? He got a laptop." Dude, a laptop in high school. That's insane. I didn't even know he was allowed to bring that here. I knew the thief would hear it, and I hoped, prayed that they'd take the bait. It took 3 days. On the third day, between second and third period, I walked to my locker like normal. The hallway smelled faintly of stale popcorn from the concession stand downstairs and the sweat of teenagers who had just come from gym class. My heart thumped faster as I turned the combination dial. Part of me was terrified that the laptop would still be there, meaning the plan had failed. And another part of me was terrified it wouldn't be there, because that meant everything was about to explode. The latch clicked open. I lifted the locker door. The bag was gone. Just like that, clean, perfect, silent, no sign of disturbance. No indication that anything had been touched except for the missing items. The laptop bag had vanished, and so had the 24-ounce bottle of Coke I kept in the corner and a couple of pens. The thief, whoever they were, didn't waste time. They wanted everything. My hands trembled. The hallway noise dulled around me. My pulse roared in my ears. I took out my phone immediately and texted Buddy exactly one word. "Taken." His reply came seconds later. "Stand by for the shit show." Also, you already reported it to the police. FYI. I stared at my screen, confused. Reported? I hadn't reported anything yet. But Buddy had planned even that. He had pre-filed the theft, so it would be on record the moment the laptop was stolen. He had set everything in motion before I even realized the game had started. The rest of that day blurred by. Every class felt irrelevant. Every minute dragged. I kept expecting something to happen. Some announcement over the speaker, some alarm, someone being dragged out of a classroom. But nothing happened. Not yet. It wasn't until the following morning, when the sun wasn't even fully up, that the entire school found out exactly how wrong they had been about the non-existent theft. Problem: I was in homeroom when the door opened abruptly. The room went silent instantly. Standing there in the doorway was Detective Buddy Badgeout, face stern, and behind him were 3 uniformed officers. But they weren't there for me. They were there for a kid named Dave. The officer stepped inside and asked for him directly. Whispers spread like shockwaves. Dave looked frozen for a moment, his eyes wide and confused, until they weren't confused anymore. Until fear washed over him. Until his face turned pale with the kind of panic only guilty people feel. As they handcuffed him and led him out, his mother, a front office employee, was pulled out of her workspace as well. She shouted, demanded answers, cursed at the officers. But Buddy ignored her. He had a warrant. He had probable cause. And most importantly, he had a GPS signal pointing directly to their house. Within hours, the police executed a search warrant on Dave's home. And what they found there would blow the lid off everything. Detective Buddy didn't waste a single minute after confirming the theft. And while I tried to go through my week pretending nothing was wrong, pretending I wasn't hyper-aware of every locker, door that slammed, and every student who glanced too long in my direction, Buddy was already assembling something far bigger than any of us realized. He met with my dad late at night, in the dim kitchen where the clock ticked too loudly and the fluorescent light hummed, and he laid everything out on the table like a chessboard only he knew how to play. The bait needed to be believable. Not too expensive, not too cheap. Something a thief targeting patterns would absolutely want. So Buddy came up with an idea that was both brilliant and unervingly precise. A fake but perfectly authentic looking TI-86 calculator sealed in its packaging with a tiny internal tracker, wired so delicately that even shaking the box wouldn't reveal it. It wasn't GPS. Tech wasn't there yet in 2003. It was a motion-activated RF transmitter with limited range. But Buddy didn't need to track the thief across town. He just needed to catch the thief in the act. He carefully sealed everything so it looked untouched, brand new, irresistible. And then he handed the box to me. Walking into school with that bait in my backpack felt unreal. It felt like I was carrying a pressure bomb. Like at any moment I would feel eyes tracking me. Like the walls themselves knew what Buddy and I were planning. It didn't help that students were still whispering nonstop about the thefts. 4 more lockers had been hid that week alone. One kid lost his entire binder full of homework. Another lost the money his parents gave him for a school trip. The fear wasn't fading. It was multiplying. And the worst part was that the principal still refused to acknowledge any of it. He walked through the hallways acting like nothing was wrong, stopping to greet teachers with that fake Politicians smile while students glared at him with resentment boiling beneath every glance. When I reached my locker that morning, my hands shook slightly as I spun the dial. I kept telling myself this was necessary. This was the only way to stop the thief. But the moment I placed the decoy calculator inside, a strange chill ran down my spine. It was as if something deep in my instincts whispered, "You're being watched." I tried brushing the feeling away. Paranoia was normal after weeks of thefts. But the sensation didn't leave. I walked through the halls that day with a pressure behind my ribs, constantly looking over my shoulder, constantly noticing the way certain people stared too long, not at me, but at my locker, at the hallway, at patterns I couldn't interpret. Meanwhile, Buddy was working behind the scenes. He returned to the school under the pretense of following up on a potential concern reported by a parent, since the school refused to cooperate officially. He casually spoke to the janitors, the office staff, even teachers, but all while observing how the administration reacted to his presence. And the reaction told him everything he needed to know. The principal looked uncomfortable, too uncomfortable. He kept avoiding Buddy, avoiding eye contact, avoiding any discussion about the theft epidemic. It wasn't the guilt of someone stealing. It was the panic of someone hiding something. Buddy wasn't new to deception. He could practically smell when someone was lying. And the principal? Oh, he reeked of it. That's why Buddy didn't just plant the bait. He requested a private meeting with the superintendent, someone above the principal, someone the principal couldn't manipulate or intimidate. And while the superintendent wasn't thrilled about the idea of an investigation over teenage locker drama, Buddy presented everything: the pattern, the frequency, the suspiciously perfect entry into locked lockers, and most importantly, the school's refusal to even take reports seriously. The superintendent reluctantly agreed to allow an observation, unofficial for now, but a foot in the door. And that was all Buddy needed. The next week felt like a countdown to something I couldn't name. Every morning, I opened my locker half expecting the bait to be gone, half expecting nothing to happen. Days passed. No theft. No disturbance. Not even the slightest shift in the position of the decoy box. It was almost frustrating. I wasn't hoping to get robbed, but I needed this to work. Buddy needed this to work. The entire school needed it to work. And then, just when it seemed like the thief had either gotten scared or disappeared, everything went wrong and right at the same time. It happened on a Wednesday. A dull morning. The kind where the sky looks gray even after sunrise and everyone walks half asleep through the halls. I went to my locker before first period, spun the dial, opened the door, and a freezing shock jolted through my body. The decoy was gone. The exact same sensation I felt the day my real calculator vanished hit me again. But this time it wasn't helplessness. This time it was adrenaline. This time it was purpose. I stepped back slowly, heart pounding, palms sweating, throat dry. The bait was gone, which meant the thief finally took it, which meant the trap was officially in motion. I didn't run to Buddy immediately. I couldn't. That wasn't the plan. If I reacted too fast, if I looked too alarmed, someone observing me might suspect the setup. So I forced myself through first period, though I couldn't focus on a single word the teacher said. My leg bounced endlessly, my pencil nearly snapped in my grip. and every tick of the clock felt like it was mocking me. All I could think was, where is the thief now? Who has the decoy? Is Buddy picking up the signal? Is the thief still on school property? What I didn't know until later was that the moment the thief removed the decoy from my locker, the internal sensor sent a tiny chirp to a handheld receiver Buddy carried. And Buddy, who had conveniently been on school grounds for routine follow-up, felt the vibration in his pocket. The transmitter wasn't perfect. It couldn't tell him the exact location, only proximity. But it pulsed faster as he moved closer to the stolen item. Buddy spent the next 20 minutes walking through hallways, pretending to review maintenance logs while secretly following the increasing signal strength. When the signal led him toward the back of the school office, the administrative area, something inside him clicked into place. The hairs on his arms stood up. His heartbeat shifted. Not chaotic, not frantic, steady, cold, controlled. He knew that feeling well. It was the feeling he got right before uncovering something big. Something ugly. Something someone did not want him to see. The transmitter pulsed harder as he neared a side office. A private one. A restricted one. And the nameplate on the door made his stomach harden instantly. Principal's office. Inside that office, behind that desk, behind that locked cabinet. The transmitter pulsed like a heartbeat. Buddy didn't barge in. He didn't need a scene. He calmly walked away, stepped outside, and phoned the superintendent. His voice was calm, steady, professional, but sharpened with purpose. "We need a warrant," he said. Now, while all of that happened behind the scenes, I sat through second period staring at the clock like I was waiting for an alarm to go off. I didn't know yet that the decoy had led Buddy exactly where he feared it might. I didn't know the principal was involved. I didn't know that the thief wasn't a student, wasn't a janitor, wasn't even a teacher, but someone with a key, someone with access, someone with motives that went far deeper than petty theft. All I knew was that the moment the decoy vanished, a storm had started rolling silently through the school. Toward the end of the period, a faint whisper moved through the hallways like electricity. Nobody knew what was happening, but everyone felt a shift. Teachers stepped out of classrooms. Students sat up straighter. Something was off. Something was different. Something big was coming. And while the entire school felt the tension, only 3 people knew the truth at that moment: Buddy, the superintendent, and the judge who signed the emergency search order. By lunch, the principal looked nervous, pale, distracted. His smile was too tight, his steps too quick, his eyes darting too often. Students noticed. Teachers noticed. Even other administrators noticed. But everyone assumed it was stress from the ongoing theft scandal. Nobody suspected that the man lecturing us daily about student responsibility was about to be exposed in the most humiliating way possible. And I, unaware of the firestorm building behind those office doors, sat at my lunch table staring at the spot where the decoy should have been, feeling the gravity of something massive about to unfold. A sense that after today, after this moment, after this week, nothing in our school would ever be the same again. Because the trap wasn't just sprung, it was closing. And the thief was already caught, even if he didn't know it yet. By the time the final bell of the day echoed through the halls, the air felt thick enough to slice with a knife, like every molecule in the building was vibrating with a secret. Students poured into the hallways, talking loudly about weekend plans and homework and cafeteria gossip. But underneath all of it was a strange tension nobody could quite explain. I walked toward my locker with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake, because even though I didn't know the details yet, something inside me knew the day wasn't normal. Something was shifting behind the walls, behind the doors, behind the authority figures we trusted. While everyone else filtered toward buses and car lines, Detective Buddy was already inside the building with the superintendent, walking through the back corridor, toward the administrative wing with a signed court order tucked into a manila folder under his arm. The principal had no idea what was coming. He sat in his office flipping through paperwork, tapping his pen against the desk, telling himself for the 1,000th time that everything was fine. Everything was covered. Nobody suspected a thing. But the knock on his door shattered that illusion instantly. It wasn't a timid knock. It wasn't a professional tap. It was firm, confident, final. The kind of knock that tells you the conversation on the other side isn't optional. When the principal opened the door and saw Buddy standing there, flanked by the superintendent, his face went pale in a way I had never seen an adult turn pale. Not the soft pale of surprise, but the stark white of someone whose stomach just dropped into their shoes. Buddy didn't smile. He didn't greet him. He simply lifted the folder and said, in a voice colder than steel, "We need to search your office." At that exact moment, I was still in the hallway, gathering books from my locker, trying to piece together the uneasy feeling in my chest. A few students whispered near me, saying they saw cops earlier, saying something weird was going on near the main office, but nobody knew anything for sure. Students speculated constantly. It was our main talent, so I didn't pay much attention. But when two teachers hurried past me with stiff shoulders and urgent steps, whispering to each other in low voices, my pulse quickened. Something was happening. Something big. And like the flickers of heat before a wildfire, the rumors spread faster with every passing second. But while the entire school buzzed with confusion, the real explosion was happening behind the closed door of the principal's office. The principal tried to protest. He tried to bluster and bark and act offended. "You can't just, this is outrageous. You need to go through the district. This is harassment." But Buddy cut him off with the calm, unshakable authority of someone who had done this 100 times before. "We have a judge's signature. If you obstruct this search, you'll be escorted out in handcuffs." And just like that, every ounce of fake confidence drained from the principal's face. He stepped aside. Buddy didn't tear the office apart dramatically like in crime shows. He moved with deliberate, surgical precision, methodically searching drawers, cabinets, binders, shelves. The principal hovered behind him like a man watching his life hang by a thread. The office looked normal, boring, even until Buddy reached the filing cabinet beside the desk. It was locked. The principal quickly said it contained personnel files and was private, but Buddy didn't blink. He simply requested the key. After a long moment of hesitation, the principal retrieved a small ring of keys from his drawer with a trembling hand. The silence in the office was so dense it felt like a physical force pressing against the walls. Buddy opened the cabinet, and the world stopped. Inside the cabinet were dozens of items, all neatly organized in labeled plastic bags, calculators, wallets, watches, necklaces, gift cards, even small amounts of cash. Items reported missing for months. Items students had cried over. items that parents had complained about, items the principal insisted never existed, and sitting right on top, positioned almost perfectly in line with the rest, was the decoy calculator Buddy had placed in my locker just days earlier. The small transmitter inside beeped faintly, confirming without question that the thief they'd been chasing across the entire school was standing less than 5 feet away, sweating through his shirt. The superintendent's jaw dropped. Buddy stared at the principal with a look that wasn't anger. It was disappointment so cold it felt like judgment from the universe itself. The principal stuttered, tried to speak, tried to form an excuse that didn't exist. I can explain these. Were confiscated items, students. Abandoned, lost, and found inventory. But every word made him sound more desperate, more ridiculous, more guilty. No principal organizes lost and found items in labeled evidence bags and locks them in a private cabinet. No principal keeps expensive electronics hidden instead of returning them. No principal takes items without recording them. And no principal accidentally ends up with the exact item stolen from a locker that very morning. While this confrontation was happening behind closed doors, the hallway around me ignited, with rumors so fast it felt like watching sparks crawl across gasoline. Kids said the principal was arguing with cops. Others said something illegal had been found in the office. Others said someone caught the thief. Some even said a teacher was being arrested. I didn't know what to believe, but the energy in the hallway felt electric, unstable, ready to break open. Teachers stood outside, their classrooms pretending to monitor. Students, but clearly distracted, glancing toward the office every few seconds. The whole building felt like it was holding its breath. Inside the office, the superintendent asked one question: why? And the principal finally broke. Not with tears, not with regret, but with a bitter, defensive confession so pathetic it almost didn't sound real. He had been stealing items from lockers for years, starting small, getting bold, taking more expensive things as the school turned a blind eye. He justified it to himself as extra compensation because he felt underpaid. He claimed the school owed him. He convinced himself students were careless, that they deserved to lose things if they weren't responsible. And when the thefts increased and students complained, instead of stopping, he created the $150 fee for changing locker combinations and personally pocketed the money. And everything spilled into the hallway. Students gasped. Teachers froze mid-step. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The principal, the man who lectured us every morning about honesty, responsibility, integrity, was escorted out of his own office in handcuffs, pale, sweating, defeated. The school erupted into shocked whispers and stunned silence all at once. People filmed. People stared. People whispered his name like it carried a curse now. After months of fear, months of frustration, months of being blamed, months of being dismissed, the truth was finally exposed. The thief wasn't a mysterious student. It wasn't a janitor. It wasn't a teacher. It wasn't a stranger. It was the man who ran the school. And as the principal was led outside, as the doors closed behind him, as the entire building buzzed in disbelief, one thought hit me with the force of a freight train. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The days that followed felt unreal. Like our school had cracked open and revealed something rotten at its core, and now nobody knew what to do with the stench. But the truth was, the principal's arrest was just the first domino. The real storm, the one that would change lives, destroy reputations, and explode into the biggest scandal our county had seen in decades, was only beginning to roar. After the principal was taken away, the school tried to act normal the next day. Morning announcements were read in the assistant principal's shaky voice. Teachers pretended nothing was wrong, and students shuffled through the hallways pretending they weren't buzzing with excitement. But the illusion shattered fast, especially when a tent appeared just outside school grounds with a banner stretched across the top reading, "If something was stolen from your locker, talk to me." And sitting inside that tent, sipping coffee like he was running a weekend yard sale, was Detective Buddy. Students approached cautiously at first, but once the first kid walked in and walked out looking relieved, the line started forming, dozens, then nearly 100. People came out wiping tears, shaking their heads, cursing under their breath, realizing their once lost belongings were now part of a criminal investigation far bigger than any of us imagined. Rumors spread like wildfire: stolen calculators, jewelry, wallets, headphones, cash, even sentimental items like birthday lockets and friendship bracelets, all traced back to the same stash. But the real shock came when word got out that someone else was involved. And not just anyone, a student. A student whose mother worked in the front office. A student who walked through the halls like he owned them. A student named Dave. The truth unfolded in pieces, each one heavier than the last. He wasn't breaking lockers open. Physically, he was stealing locker combinations, using his mother's admin login. He accessed the school network, retrieved codes for entire grade levels, and then spent months wandering through the school, opening random lockers, fishing out valuables like he was picking apples off a tree. And every time someone complained, the principal shut it down because if thefts became real, he'd be implicated too. It was a cycle of corruption that could only exist in a place where adults failed completely, and students were treated like they deserved every bad thing that happened to them. The police didn't wait long. The very next morning, officers arrived with another warrant, this time for Dave's house. And the moment they stepped inside, the case transformed from school theft problem to full-blown criminal enterprise. Bags of stolen items filled his room. Expensive jewelry, high-value electronics, multiple graphing calculators, dozens of wallets, cash, gift cards, even unredeemed prepaid Visa cards. And in the corner of the room, zipped inside a laptop bag, was the very decoy laptop Buddy had placed in my locker, still broadcasting its GPS signal like a beacon leading detectives straight to the heart of the operation. Both Dave and his mom were arrested that same afternoon, pulled straight out of school as the student body watched in stunned silence. Some whispered, some gasped. Some looked like their entire worldview had tilted sideways. And me? I stood frozen, heart pounding, realizing the thefts weren't just petty crimes. They were part of something calculated, organized, and shockingly bold. The investigation ramped up so fast the district couldn't hide anymore. Detectives cataloged stolen property, cross-checked serial numbers, matched engraved initials, and built a case so airtight it was practically bulletproof. Each stolen item became a separate charge. If it was worth under $1,000, it was a misdemeanor. Over $1,000, felony, and the final count, 9 felonies and 35 misdemeanors. And that was only what they could prove. The estimated number of actual thefts hovered somewhere above 200, but without evidence, they couldn't be included. Still, this was enough to destroy any life tied to it. While all this unfolded, another battle ignited, one the school never saw coming. Students and parents, fed up with being blamed, fed up with being charged $150 for every combination change, fed up with being told thefts didn't exist, hired a law firm and launched a class action lawsuit against the entire school district. 218 people joined. The case argued that the school ignored theft reports, refused to investigate, protected the culprits, and then unfairly charged students. Solve a problem they never addressed. It was the kind of lawsuit districts dread: public, embarrassing, and incredibly expensive. And when the dust settled, the district had to refund every student $100, even after attorney fees. Each person still received $85. That meant the school had to pay out $21,800, not counting legal costs, not counting reputation damage, not counting the administrative chaos that followed. The principal didn't just lose his job, he became a punchline, a cautionary tale, a ghost people muttered about in grocery stores. His name carried a stain that would follow him forever. Then came the criminal trial, a spectacle that turned our quiet county courthouse into a media circus. Reporters lined the steps. Parents sat in packed rows. Students whispered about it during lunch. The prosecution offered a plea deal, 10 years for Dave, 15 for his mom. But arrogance is a powerful thing. They refused, thinking they'd beat the charges. They didn't, not even close. The judge looked at Dave like he was staring at wasted potential, a kid who had every chance but chose greed instead. And for each felony, the judge gave him 1 year in prison, the state minimum, totaling 9 years. For each misdemeanor, 1 month of probation, 35 months. And his mother? The judge didn't hold back. She got 18 years in prison and 6 years of probation. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of a single woman in the back gasping. I attended almost every major court day, not out of spite, but because I needed to understand how something so small, a stolen calculator, became something so enormous. And near the end, when Detective Buddy sat beside me and whispered, "This is what accountability looks like," I felt something loosen in my chest. A weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying for months began to lift. But the moment that stayed with me forever wasn't the sentencing. It wasn't the lawsuit victory. It wasn't even seeing the principal led away in handcuffs. It was when Buddy handed me a small plastic evidence bag one chilly afternoon outside the courthouse. Inside it was my graphing calculator, the same one I bought with my own saved money, the same one I needed for class, the same one I thought was gone forever. I opened the battery compartment, and there it was, my name, engraved in the metal in sloppy letters I carved years earlier. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the familiarity of each button, the faint scratches on its plastic surface. It wasn't about the calculator anymore. It was about closure, justice, finally knowing I hadn't been careless, that I hadn't imagined the theft, that the system wasn't allowed to crush me without consequences. And as I stood there holding the calculator, listening to the courthouse doors closing behind another chapter of the story, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about hurting someone. Sometimes The sweetest revenge is watching the truth finally step into the light, and watching every single person who doubted you, blamed you, or dismissed you face the reality they tried to bury. I still have that calculator today. Sometimes I take it out, run my thumb over my engraved name, and remember that even when the world tries to paint you as the problem, the truth has a way of breaking through. And when it does, justice hits harder than any revenge you could possibly plan.